Before we get to the episode, we want you, dear listener, to ask yourself a question. What have you done these past 2 years? You know, the pandemic hit us all really hard. What have you really done other than perfect that matzo ball soup recipe of yours? Nothing. Now, we all want to add purpose and meaning to our life, and we have the way to really, really make your dreams come true. If you're listening, you're likely interested in Israel with hopes of traveling here soon. Well, lucky for you, we've got the scoop on Masa Israel Journey. With an amazing range of life-changing opportunities in Israel, Masa has many, many programs. They've got gap year programs, academics, internships, volunteering, and careers. The pandemic didn't stop them either, promoting options to study remotely while living in Israel. You don't have to be fluent in Hebrew or break your bank account. They even supply partial funding so you can make a positive impact on the world. You can fuel your passion and you can make your travel dreams a reality. Go to masaisrael.org and find out more. This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
In collaboration with Australian Jewish News, check them out at ajn.timesofisrael.com. Also in collaboration with Arutz Sheva, israelnationalnews.com.
Marriage and relationships have never been easy. Since the day Abraham told his beloved wife Sarah he wants to have an open relationship, millions of couples have had to navigate the stormy waters of intimacy. And although throughout history, maintaining a relationship was never easy, doing so in the 21st century brings along its own unique set of challenges. In the age of internet with its metaverse, high-tech, TikTok, and Twitch, we're constantly facing temptations, jealousy, and FOMO. Maybe our parents were better off after all? To talk about all this and much, much more, we're joined today by a very honorable guest, Professor Danielle Knafo. Professor Knafo is a psychologist, psychoanalyst, and author. She's considered one of the top sexuality theoreticians in the world. Danielle Knafo is a professor in the Clinical Psychology Doctoral Program at LIU-Post and on the faculty at NYU Postdoctoral Program. She has published and lectured extensively on the subjects of creativity, psychoanalysis, gender, sexuality, and technology. She maintains a private practice in Manhattan and Great Neck, New York. I'm super happy to have Professor Knafo on our show today. Hello.
Hello.
So if people want to go to the clinic, they can reach out and...
They can.
Okay. So we'll put links, guys. We have listeners in New York. So
and they can find my books on Amazon.
Yeah, we'll also put links to that. So where do we start from? I guess let's start with something easy. I was thinking maybe necrophilia or
something easy.
Yeah, let's start from an easy theme, and then we'll go to the hardcore stuff. So necrophilia, pros and cons.
Pros. You have a body that doesn't resist, that isn't choosy. Cons.
It's illegal.
Not everywhere.
Oh, no?
No.
Where is it legal?
You'd be surprised how few places it actually is illegal.
Also in the States?
Yes. There are many states.
Even zoophilia is
there are many
legal
states in which it's legal. That
really?
They've never come around to making a law against it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm not asking it randomly. You wrote about it.
Yes, I wrote about it.
How come?
Well, I had a client who seduced his sister when she was asleep. And the Bill Cosby episode of drugging women and then in order to have sex with them while they were out.
Not seduced, sedated. seduced his sister?
My
No.
patient.
You said he seduced his sister when she was asleep?
Yes. Not seduced, right. Did I use the
Yeah.
word seduced?
Yeah.
Seduced is the wrong word. He abused.
Abused, okay.
Yeah, I was making it lighter. So I was working with him around that issue. At the same time, there was the Bill Cosby scandal where he sedated many women with drugs and had sex with them when they were unconscious. So, and then I saw the Pedro Almodovar movie, Talk to Her, about these two men who fall in love with comatose women, and one even impregnates one of them. And so there were all of these things. And then finally, I also had a client who was in love with a doll and lived with a doll in a relationship, which in some ways has some commonalities with necrophilia. It's not exactly the same, but it is the desire on the part of mostly men here we're talking about.
That's sexist, but okay, I'll give you a
It's not
I'm
sexist.
I'm just joking.
It's statistics.
Yeah.
It's not sexist.
I'm just joking around. Okay.
It's mostly men who are attracted to having sexual relations, and not just sexual relations, also intimate relations where they fantasize and project onto these dead bodies, so to speak, whether it's an actual human body or a doll, sex doll, humanoid body. And there are all kinds of speculations as to why that would be attractive to somebody. And one of the main reasons is that
Low maintenance.
It's low maintenance. It's a silent partner. It's a partner you can have whenever you want. There's no rejection. There's no humiliation. There's no all of the things that a man who has to perform would be anxious about with a woman. There's no negotiation. There's no considering someone else's needs or desires, et cetera, et cetera. So it can go from a very mild, objectification of the woman, all the way to necrophilia, where only a dead woman is a good woman.
How? Okay, so let's dive into this patient who had a relationship with a doll.
Yes.
How does that work?
How does it work?
The day-to-day practice.
Well, I've interviewed about 15 of these men who live with dolls. And these are high-end sex dolls. Mm-hmm. They're very expensive. They're about $10,000. And they're very human-like. But the men that I was interested in, including my client who got me interested in the whole subject, was these men who actually develop relationships with the dolls. They don't just use the dolls for sex. They develop intimate relationships, and they imagine that the relationship is mutual. That's what I found so interesting when I interviewed them. They know on one level that this is a doll, it's a thing, it's an object. And on another level, when they talk about it, the doll, it's
her.
It's her. She has a name, she has a personality, she has an occupation, she has feelings, they have a relationship. So there's this line that they walk between reality and fantasy.
And they take her to places?
Very few do that. Mm-hmm. Many of them keep it secret.
Yeah.
But there are a few who take the doll out. The dolls are heavy. They're dead weight, and so they put them in a wheelchair and wheel them around. But most of the men keep them secret.
And what was like when a patient comes to you with such an issue? Is it an issue? I don't know. In nowadays,
Well, if a patient comes with that, that means they're bothered by it. I've interviewed other men who wouldn't go to therapy because they're happy with the way things are.
right?
And so one of the men who I got to know quite well said his dolls are his therapy. And what happens with these men, sometimes they get one doll and then another one and another one and another one.
But can you, through therapy, change someone's sexuality?
It's not conversion therapy.
You know, if I take it to the extreme, because here conversion therapies are, I mean, I guess 30 years ago or 50 years ago, it wouldn't.
Even
it would
10
be,
years ago.
Even 10 years ago, it would be the same. Today, the lines change, the norms change.
Yeah. No, I never change somebody who doesn't want to be changed. Therapy for me is not forceful.
Right.
People come to me because they have an issue, because they're bothered by something, because they're stuck in some way, and they want help. So this one client who came to me who was living with a doll, in the beginning he was happy with his doll, but not 100%. He started feeling uncomfortable around people. He knew he had a secret. He didn't, it started bothering him that he lived with a doll. And so we began talking about it. I don't go in and, I'm going to change you.
Right.
It has to come from the person. But a lot of times it comes from the person after we analyze what is the function of the doll, the disappointments this patient had with women in the past and not wanting to get hurt again, but still wanting that female companionship. And through the therapeutic relationship with me, he actually developed a trusting again in a human woman, and then could take that trust outwards. And so he got to a point where he wanted to give up his doll and try again in the human world.
But what you do, it's just interesting if you face a situation, and this could happen, and there is in your recent article such a situation a bit similar where a gay Muslim enters your office. In this case, maybe he didn't want to change that. But what do you do as a therapist when a gay Muslim or ultra-Orthodox comes to your office and tells you, as like the guy who's fallen in love with dolls and it bothers him, he comes to you and says, it bothers me that I'm gay, I don't want to be gay. What do you do? It's a moral issue, I guess.
It's a very complex issue. I work with the person where they are. I always meet the person where they are. If they're conflicted, we talk about their conflicts. So the Muslim man who came to me and I don't know if he didn't want to be gay or he just felt so conflicted with his environment that wouldn't accept his being gay. So he knew, in the beginning he was conflicted with his own desires, but a lot of that conflict came from the environment he was living in that told him in no uncertain terms, including his family, you cannot be gay.
Yeah.
You cannot be who you are, basically, they were telling him. And so we had to deal with that, how he felt getting to know what his desires were, what his feelings were, and how much that was coming from his environment, and how to handle that within the environment he lived, and what sacrifices that might entail.
Yeah.
So I always follow. I don't lead. I don't advise. I don't change. I follow a person, but I help them understand. I enlarge their understanding so that they can make the choices that they want to make as a result of an enlarged awareness of how they got to where they are.
So how does the modern age, internet, porn industry, conversations, how does that affect what you face in your therapies when people come to you?
It affects it enormously. enormously. I mean, I've been in this business for 40 years.
So you have a perspective.
I have a perspective, and I have a perspective over time. The last years, which is what led me to start writing about the influence of technology on intimacy, on sexuality, on how we relate to ourselves, on our own self-identities, is because all of the changes I've been seeing in my students, in my patients who I work with, and people who I know. It's influenced people enormously. I don't even know where to begin. Try to focus me a little.
So let's talk about porn addiction.
Pornography.
Yeah.
It's huge.
You say in your article, I think, that 80% of the bandwidth of internet, right? Something crazy like that is porn.
Porn keeps the internet alive.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. Just Pornhub, which I think is the largest pornography site on the internet, gets 1 billion users a day.
By the way, have you heard about a few months ago what happened with Pornhub?
What?
They were practically shut down by the credit card companies that told them either you take down like 90% of your videos, or we shut you off. So they had to take down almost all of the, and there was a huge...
because what? They found that which kind of videos were they?
There were like abusive to I don't know, like pedophiles and like rapes and stuff like that. So not unlike what recently happened also, I think, with OnlyFans, they also had such an issue. They shut it down,
but they opened it up
right
again. Yeah.
But yeah, so credit card companies or server companies have been giving problems to those.
They give problems, but then these
but then you have other websites.
These things keep them going too.
Yeah.
So it's always it's a certain hypocrisy also, like Instagram that allowed the OnlyFans and makes money from the OnlyFans, and then says, "Oh no, we don't do this. We don't do sex." They did sex, they would admit, and then as soon as they shut it down and there was a lot of objection, they opened it up again.
If our listeners don't know what OnlyFans is, it's a website where you can basically, it's like Instagram, only you charge, you have subscribers who pay you, and you can post any kind of photo, including nudity content. So many people, specifically women, made a lot of money.
Sex workers, it's moved sex work online and changed the face of sex work by giving the women, mostly women, a lot ownership. Of power that now they don't have to pay a pimp. They don't have to. They don't have to be touched. They're not in danger, and so and some of them make a lot of money. Yeah. So
it really disrupted the world of porn in a sense.
And porn, yes, absolutely. So that's another way that things are changing. Yeah. Back to porn addiction, though, I'm seeing more and more of that in my private practice, and a lot of my colleagues are as well. Not only in individual patients, mostly male, but it's beginning to grow with female. About 30% of porn users are female. So, but still, it's the majority male, but females are beginning to use it more and more also. But also in couples, that you see porn addiction or porn usage becomes a problem in a couple.
Because one...
Well, I have 2 patients right now where the males are addicted to porn, and they haven't had sex with their partner
because it's boring
in
now.
decades. They're good friends. They have a good relationship, but their sexuality is elsewhere.
And because porn pushes your your desires to the edge, essentially, is what you write about.
Not just to
also.
the edge. It can, but it's addictive. It's addictive. It's an addiction, just like a drug addiction. And people become addicted to it and need it again and again and again and more. And so, one, it's an addiction. Two, it creates certain unrealistic ways of gratifying oneself that then it becomes difficult to transition back to human sex with the same person. Internet porn, you can have a different partner every time you go on the internet.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you have a partner in real life, you have to keep that exciting with that one person. And so people get drawn to that, and it can really affect the relationships that people
and it
are in.
affects another field you're talking about, which is perversions. It affects also that, right? Because you see, maybe you're an innocent teenager.
Yeah.
You never heard about all those things that can be done, and then you get exposed to that, and then maybe you develop those things that. But I don't know. I guess even perversions, it's always, even if you discover them in a porno when you were 15 or 20 or whatever, it's
or
still
9.
It's or 9.
9 to 11
or 9
is
months.
when most. No, 9 to 11 is when most
Right.
most kids are exposed
But it still
to pornography.
correlates. A perversion still correlates to something deeply enrooted in you, though, right? Or is it?
Well, Freud would say yes, and many people would say yes, that we all have there's a universality to perversion. Freud called, the infant stage polymorphous perverse. In other words, when you see an infant, they get turned on by everything and everyone. They don't say, oh, you're a male, I'm only turned on by female. You're old, I'm only turned on by young. You're an animal. Like, everything excites them. That's the polymorphous perversity. They're not picky. They're not, they're into diversity and pleasure from wherever it may come. But it's only with socialization that children are taught, don't do this, don't go there, take that to your room. And people's sexuality then becomes much more constricted and much more narrow, actually, and also secretive. Because don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. Well, what if I want to? Then I have to do it over here, or in my mind, in fantasy, or online, right? So sexuality becomes compartmentalized very easily because it's not mirrored in the same way that other behaviors are with children.
But perversions, it's hard to define them because...
Very hard.
Because some things that once were perversions today are norms.
Yes, changes. Our idea of perversion
I can tell you
changes.
From personal experience that I don't think people realize the amount of, I can testify on women who want you to hit them, to choke them, to tie them.
That seems to be very popular today.
Yes, it's
And
almost,
in my day, that was not
right.
That was not a thing.
Right. So what's that all about?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of people attribute it to 50 Shades of Grey and the popularity of that series made it kind of normative. But it's really interesting what is perversion, because perversion is often what we call, abnormal sexuality. Perversion isn't just sex, though. Perversion is anything that's outside of the box or that breaks boundaries, right? But clinically, when we're talking about perversion, we're also talking about people who need to do things a certain way, or there's usually a type of dehumanization involved. It's a move away from the human to more objectification, dehumanization. It's also similar to addictive behaviors. People like internet porn. They get addicted to a certain type of behavior, and it has to be a certain way. There's no fluidity. Usually when we're talking about pathology or normality in mental health, we're talking about pathology usually has to do with being stuck in some way and not being able to change. I can't change. That's when people come to therapy. When they're stuck, they're at an impasse. They can't seem to change and to adapt. And so the same thing goes with sexuality.
And why did you start to study perversions? Because of cases that came to your clinic? Yes. Because of cases, like in my previous book on the age of perversion, I started seeing that there was an increase in this kind of objectification and dehumanization. I think the internet facilitates that somewhat. People are relating to other people more through their devices than face to face. And there's this distancing that gets created. People are more comfortable with the objects, the devices, the distance that creates, the as if quality. We can create ourselves online in a way that we can't. I'm looking at his computer as I talk, so every time I look. People create a certain facade, a certain profile, a certain, you can make up things online that it's much harder in person when you're with somebody in person who can really get to know you up close. Is that what shallows our existence, basically?
Makes it more shallow. I think so, probably. In certain ways, yes. It's less nuanced. And it's less genuine in a certain way.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it because now Seinfeld is on Netflix.
Great show.
Great show. And, watching it, I watched it as a kid, but rewatching it now, it makes you really think and maybe yearn to the old days, because it's, first of all, almost 80% of the plot lines would have been solved if there was a cell phone in the show. But it's a show about relationships and about dating in New York, and they change a partner every episode. But the way, for example, when they say, I instead of Tinder, in one of the recent episodes I saw, George says, I called her and we talked for 2 hours on the phone. Before the date.
Before the date, yeah.
And I'm like, this never happens.
Who does this?
Who does that? Right. Or the way they approach women. Because there is no Tinder, it's more legitimate to approach a woman or a man in the street, in a coffee shop, in everywhere they see a woman, they approach her because that's the only way. Or they ask their friends to do a shidduch, as they say.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about, as I said in the intro, were our parents or your generation better off, you think, than us?
Well, in certain ways, but probably the answer is yes and no. Right. But I think in certain ways we were better off because I'm very big on human to human relationships, and the more whatever makes us human. And I'm very into technology. I'm dependent on my technology. Today I thought I lost my cell phone for a minute and I went crazy. And it made me realize, again and again,
you're addicted too.
How dependent I am. And if I lost it, it's like my world is in there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I try to keep relationships as real and not just, there's a convenience, there's an ease of just texting or but there's also a distance. There's an opportunity to misread people. You don't get the tone of voice. You don't get to see the person's eyes. I see young teens sitting next to each other, texting each other. They're sitting next to each other.
Yeah.
They won't turn and talk to each other. They prefer to text each other. They're so used to communicating in that way. So we've lost something. I think we've lost what Sherry Turkle says. We've lost empathy because of this overuse of technology in our ways of relating.
It makes dating very hard. For our generation.
Dating, I think it makes sexuality hard. I think it makes a lot of relational. It's affected our relationship patterns and facility and intimacy pretty greatly. And we know today, there's studies that show that if there's a phone in a bedroom with a couple, they're less likely to have sex. Than if
the mere existence of a phone.
They're not on the phone. Just it's sitting there. The knowledge it's there. It's like another.
That's because the Chinese might be watching, unless you like being watched.
Or the Israelis.
Yeah, or the Israelis.
But
that's crazy.
So just the presence of this object affects us so much, and affects how we relate to another, and how reluctant people are to put it away. To put it in another room and say, now I'm with you. Now it's just us.
Yeah, when I put away the phone on a Shabbat dinner, it's like an itch you can scratch. It's hard. It's hard and it's painful and it's sad. It's really sad. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing? As I'm on the phone and sometimes I envy the religious.
Yes.
Right? For them, that's maybe they are
that
free.
Break.
Yeah.
I asked her just last week.
That's how they make so many children. They get the passion. What else do you do on Shabbat?
I asked some of my ultra-Orthodox students how they deal with the phone. And they say it's a certain relief. But as the Shabbat is ending, they're starting to feel the itch and waiting.
Yeah.
Countdown. So you see that. It's fascinating.
So how do you see dating in my generation? Because to me, it's so hard to date.
You would probably tell me more. Talk about it, and I'll tell you.
It's just okay. First of all, the dating apps. There are so many of them. They are themselves are addictive. Yeah, and they
People
manipulate. They use the same way, like they use the same thing, the same algorithms that Instagram is using or Facebook or Twitter is using. They have people, their only purpose, they get paid to make it more addictive, right? To use all kinds of, to push all our buttons. They are, I guess, they have background in psychology and
mostly technology,
and they know, like for example, on Twitter, they just changed it that they could have refreshed your feed automatically, right? But instead, in order to see the new tweets, you gotta scroll up, and there's this animation, and then it like triggers your brain, something very primal in your brain. So the same thing with the dating apps. They're extremely addictive. You can easily find yourself spending money, and they're making a lot of money, which is also frightening because it looks like very minor sums, but you find yourself you look in a yearly term and you find yourself, oh my God, I could have bought, I don't know, an electric guitar.
And how much time you spend on it.
And then the quality of the dates are mediocre because I can say from a boy's point of view, from a girl's point of view, I guess you'll hear other things or the same things, but from a man's point of view in Tel Aviv specifically, because this is another interesting thing, that in Europe it's completely different. Every place is a bit different, but here in Tel Aviv I feel like the girls are all in FOMO, right? It's very hard to find someone just who is willing to go out with you to more than a date or two. So the main problem with the apps for me is the FOMO they're creating and their addictiveness.
What do you mean? The fear of missing out?
Yeah, because like
there's always someone else.
You have
there's
like 10 matches.
And I'll go out with you, but then this one just contacted me. But then this one, and that you don't want to. What if this one's better? And what if that one's?
So it's very hard to commit.
Yeah.
So how
and then people just the serial dating
Yes.
becomes. I've known several who just get so caught up in this.
Yeah.
Three different people a week, and
Right.
then the next week, and then the next week, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And they don't give anyone enough. And I tell them, just slow down, stay with one, give one a chance.
Yeah.
Just,
In Hebrew, there's a verb. It's called lemakbel, which is parallelizing. I guess. Parallelizing. Yeah, when you go to more than a date with
Yeah.
several women in the same time without them knowing about each other, or a woman can do it with several men.
Yeah.
And only because you don't know what to choose. So you say, okay, I'll date the 3 of them or the 2 of them simultaneously. They won't know about each other for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then I'll decide.
Yeah.
You push the decision down the road. So how do you see all that? What is there hope for our generation?
Well, the other side of it, the positive side of it, is that you get a much larger pool from which to choose. So, in my day, you met people either at work or at school.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was a smaller pool of people that you could meet. Whereas with the internet, it really allows you to meet people that you might not have come across. And so the opportunities are
Right.
many more. But I agree with you that you have to do it judiciously in a way. If you're serious about finding a partner and not just dating forever, but really finding a partner, a life partner, then you can't just keep jumping from one to the next, to the next, to the next. You have to give one a chance, date them for a while, see if they're good, whatever, and stop looking at you have to, like putting the phone away, put the dating app away, close it while you're dating somebody and check it out, give it a chance.
Yeah.
But what happens is that temptation, oh, wait a minute, there's this guy, and scrolling and I don't know, left, right, whatever.
Yeah. Swiping.
Swiping. It becomes a pastime, right? And people do it together. Look at this one. Oh, go out with this one. Oh, say yes to this one.
You give it to your girlfriend. You give it to your friend to do it for you.
A collective thing. So,
to me, it's very depressing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's. I had periods when I deleted the apps. I tried to have those periods. Just as you face addiction, that's my strategy, right? To delete the apps, but. Eventually, you keep going back to them.
You go back because that's how people meet people these days.
Also, there's a lot less socializing because of the WhatsApp and the interactivity. There's a lot less social. Again, we go back to Seinfeld. They hang out all the time because if they weren't hanging out, they died they'd be bored to death, basically, right? So they hang out, they go to park. So today, I feel like. So yeah, it all to me it's a bit sad. It's a bit sad. I feel myself sometimes envious.
And yet a third of marriages have begun on dating apps.
Right.
A third, which is not, and it's growing.
But then 50% get divorced. So
yeah, but that's the more depressing statistic. That's true, but. There's positives and negatives to it.
Yeah.
The opportunities to meet people. I think you have to do it in a very judicious way.
Yeah.
There's
the religious and the ultra. Even now, today in Israel, the religious, not only the ultra orthodox, also just the religious, they meet. There's shidduch.
Yes.
Still.
Yes.
Or you go in the Dati-Leumi community here, you go out with someone for 2 or 3 days, and then you decide. And you get married, and you have kids immediately.
Make it work.
And you make it work. Or you don't. But so, yeah.
And
sometimes
those marriages don't necessarily end up worse than, dating hundreds of people. Because they go into it with a different mindset. It's not I have to fall in love. No, they look for a good partnership.
Yeah.
And they will build that partnership together, and that love grows from the partnership. Not that you have to fall in love with somebody in order to settle down. It's a very different approach.
Do you think Disney movies and Hollywood basically effed up our brains?
I think it's not just Disney movies. Look, 100 years ago, people got married not for love, for economic reasons. And over time, we've started focusing on relationships, intimate relationships, as having to answer so many of our needs, right? That wasn't the case before.
Yeah.
And there were very clear kind of gender roles. You do this, I do that. I'm the provider. You take care of the kids, blah, blah. Now, everything is up for grabs, but people really want their partners to answer many, many needs. They want them to be interesting, intelligent, sexual, good partners, good parents, good this, good that, and good communicators. And often they're disappointed because this person doesn't hit, you can't check off all the got this, got that, got this.
Yeah.
But nobody has everything. Nobody's going to supply everything for someone. So I think there's also that expectation from another person to be so much for us, which doesn't happen. And in those arranged marriages, they don't have those kinds of expectations.
Right.
Including that I don't have to be in love with this person in order to marry.
Also the concept of happiness, right?
Yeah.
We constantly seek happiness. And to them, happiness is
having
a perk,
having a good
family,
a good partnership, a good family,
and serve God.
And
And also, I'm thinking our generation, nobody taught us how to do those things, how to approach a woman, how to approach a man, how to hit on a girl. And here in Tel Aviv, there's a constant gag about the seduction courses. I don't know if it got to New York City. NLP, the art of seduction. And many guys.
Is that a thing here now?
It's a thing for some years already because mainly guys go to those.
One of my students did her dissertation on that. Yeah.
And what did she find out?
Oh God, it was years ago.
It's people having a laugh at it, but I can relate to those guys who
need a little guidance.
They don't know what to do.
How do you do this? How do you? Yeah.
But then girls get annoyed because they go in Rothschild, right? And this random dudes approach them very aggressively, and it becomes harassment.
A lot of it clashes with the sensitivity today of harassment and consent and all of that, because a lot of what they're teaching is based on kind of basic evolutionary principles of how the male has to be, an alpha male and kind of aggressive and confident. And what happens is not every man feels that way. And so they're putting on some fake facade just to seduce the woman. But then what? Right. You have to live up to something,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fakery. I wrote this paper on catfishing, the whole idea of people making up identities or stealing someone else's identity in order to seduce basically somebody online. And online it's easy to do that because you don't know who you're talking to necessarily. Right. If it's not someone you've met, you don't know whether this person, how genuine this person is. Or not, and people make up identities, and even in the online dating, there's a lot of lying.
Right, putting in old photo.
Yeah, old photos, changing,
occupation, what do you do, stuff like that.
They say that women lie more about their weight and their age, and men lie more about their height and their income.
Height is a sensitive issue. I can tell you, like, many girls wouldn't date me. I don't know in inches. It's 5'6", I guess. And yeah, it's a deal breaker.
It can be a deal breaker.
So it's a problem. It's a real problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, I never lie about it though.
No. Eventually you meet someone.
Yes. That's the funny thing also about your paper. You talk about it, like, what's the point of catfishing? Sooner or later so people just stretch the time, right?
They stretch the time and they enjoy the fantasy. What I'm saying about the catfishing and also the living with dolls is that, yes, there's an enormous amount of fantasy involved in these, but there's a certain degree of fantasy. It's made me think of how much fantasy there is in any kind of relationship. We always project onto people what we want them to be.
Right.
I mean, how many people did you date for a few months, and then after a few months you think, what did I think?
Yeah.
Who was this person?
Right.
You thought it was one person and you find out it was another person, because it takes time to get to know someone. And only with time and investment do you really get to know somebody. And also people put on their best foot forward in the beginning of a relationship.
Yeah.
And little by little that gets eroded and you start getting to know who the person really is.
Only after a few months you find out that he's been having another relationship with a doll.
Yeah,
or something
for
like
example. But, or even on Facebook or on what do people post on Facebook? Only the great things.
Yeah.
Their trips. They're great. They don't tell you, I'm really depressed
I'm suicidal,
today. Yeah. One time I had a friend he's constantly like, I'm going to kill myself, but it stands out because nobody writes posts like that. Only him.
But in the article, in the paper, you also write that your identity was stolen.
Twice.
But you don't elaborate. You keep it vague in the paper. I was wondering if
my identity was stolen. That's why I'm very sensitive to this issue.
By, like, what happened?
Well, somebody stole my purse, my wallet, and stole my identity. And here in Israel once, somebody broke into my hotel room, sprayed me so I had to stay asleep, and stole my papers. And after that, and took on my identity. And after that, for a while, every time I came to Israel, I was stopped. And after years of this, I said, what is going on? Why are you stopping me every time? And then they told me that my identity had been stolen.
It's very disturbing.
Yeah. And after that, they stopped. I said, cut it out. It's me.
Yeah.
But it can be very disturbing when your identity is taken. Suddenly it's out there, people doing with it whatever they want.
Right. One thing I have to talk about with you, I kept the best for last, is one of the areas you research is gender.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been following, if you follow conservative thinkers like Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson, the debate about that is very intense, very divisive between political parties. And I don't know where I guess it's very hard to perceive to the average Joe, right? The concept of gender. So do you see it as...
What's difficult? Which aspect is difficult?
The aspect that
Are you talking about transgender or just the idea of gender fluidity?
The idea of gender fluidity.
Gender fluidity.
Yeah. The idea that and the idea of genders like they, for example, it's very hard to perceive, or the new genders that they are coming up with, like them, or all those pronouns, the whole pronouns.
It's endless.
Yeah. And, you can argue that, like, for example, if I'm a Muslim, if I was born in Morocco in the Sahara Desert, and tomorrow I'm going to come up and say, I'm a Jewish rabbi, right? The fact that you feel yourself as a Jewish rabbi doesn't You can think about yourself whatever you want, but you cannot force me to recognize you as a Jewish rabbi, right? I have my set of laws, and that's how I perceive a rabbi. So how is gender different, in your opinion, from that?
This is a very hot and argued topic these days.
Right.
And it's also very political, it has the political correctness. So I think that it is difficult for a lot. Look, when I was growing up and when I was training, there were two genders. You were either male or female, and you were either gay or straight.
Right.
And gay was considered pathological.
Right, it was in the DSM,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. And now there's this abundance of possibilities of gender. So, for example, on Facebook, I think you have 60 genders you can identify as 60. In Tinder, I think there's 40. So we've really completely come to a different place when we're thinking about gender. And the main aspect of that is that there's something more, we're considering it as more fluid, that it's not as strict as you're male or you're female, that just like there's polymorphous perversity, that there's a fluidity in how we define our gender. So what a lot of people are doing is thinking of gender as a social construct, not as a biological construct. I personally have a little difficulty with denying biology. I think we live in bodies, and there is biology in our bodies.
Right.
So I'm not for erasing biology. I think we have to consider our biologies. But I do understand the social influence and the fantasy. Again, we'll come back to fantasy influence of gender. There's an illusory quality to gender. Judith Butler, queer theorist, called gender masquerade, right? Or RuPaul, the drag queen, said, you're born naked and the rest is drag. So that there's a certain artifice or illusory quality to gender, because we're taught gender also. We get it from our society, from social norms. This is what, one of the first questions that people are asked when they have a baby is, what, a boy or a girl? Mm-hmm. What are you having? A boy or a girl?
And you paint the room accordingly.
And right there, it's like, that's the first question. These gender reveal parties. Mm-hmm. This is the big thing we're going to celebrate. So there's enormous amount of expectation that we put into gender. Right. And how we're going to raise a child or not raise a child because of how we consider gender. But what we see today is basically that people are being very creative about their genders. They want to have ownership over how they are regarded, or how they present, or how they want to be identified as.
Right.
So you even have people who call themselves gender curious, right? There's no end to gender the way we had before. You're male, you're female. Now you can just be curious about it.
Right.
It can be something gender questioning, right? I don't have to have a goal. It doesn't have to be, well, I'm non-binary, which also is kind of vague. Well, yeah. It's not this or that, but what is it, right? So there's a lot of questioning. There's a lot of ambiguity. There's fluidity. There's a feeling that people can, mix and match and create their own gender or not.
But is it science or is it philosophy?
It's not science.
It's not
neither.
science.
It's neither science nor philosophy. It's very individual. Because
in the argument, the woke argument is that it portrays it as a form of science, because
we have a bit of both genders in us. We have hormones from both genders. We have right. Is that why?
If you come and say this person is a they, Okay, and the science is if they define themselves as a they, then they are a they, right?
Well, that's not science. That's just you go along with what someone wants to be identified with, and you respect that.
Right, but I'm forced because the thing is, when someone is gay or homosexual or lesbian, there is science behind it, right? Because sexual attraction can be portrayed in science, can be portrayed in hormones and biology, whereas here it's pure psychology, right? Which makes it very vague. So I'm thinking aloud here, but can you relate to people who cannot identify with those concepts?
Yeah, I can relate to anyone. I have that
that's
ability.
Your profession, yeah.
No, it's also my nature that I can empathize very easily with a broad range of people. So I can empathize with people who don't want to identify with either male or female, or who are born in a male body but feel themselves more identified with a female and want to identify in that way. So I can see that. I think it's also complex though, because as a psychologist, as a psychoanalyst, I think that just because somebody says, now I'm this, and I've seen people who then regret that and say, well, you know what, that was a phase. Sometimes it's a phase, sometimes it's not. It's very complex, it's very individualized, and at least in the people that I've worked with, there's, I like complexity, nuance, subtleties. To me, when you just say it's this and you can't argue, I get a little, well, let's explore, let's understand it, let's explore it. Anybody who's a little too adamant about there's only one way of seeing things, to me it puts me off a little, because I'm a psychologist. I go deep.
Yeah.
I believe in an unconscious. I believe that our past and our many things influence us to become who we are. But I respect people's choices and people's decisions. And the main thing that concerns me is that, are people comfortable with who they are? Are they comfortable with the decisions they make? Or is there something that bothers them? Or does it come from trauma? Or does it come from, is there a conflict there? Is there an impact? Do they feel stuck somewhere? Those are the things that concern me much more than, is it a he or a she or a they or whatever?
Right.
Those things are less critical to me than how someone is conducting themselves day to day, how they feel about who they are, how they are in relationships with others. Are they fulfilled? Are they getting what they want? Are they stuck in some way? Those are the things that concern me. A label doesn't concern me so much.
Do you have a patient in your career that really shook your life, that really changed your life, that really influenced you in a very immense way?
I have a few. I work with people. I'm known also to work with people who are quite extreme. But I'm affected by everyone I meet, including my patients. If I'm not affected by them, then I'm not involved. You have to, in my line of work, it's not a detached, first of all, I'm not a detached kind of person, but you have to allow yourself to be affected. Like, for example, the man who lived with a doll, I had never met someone who lived with a doll and loved a doll. And so it completely blew my mind. In the beginning, I thought, my God, this is an objectification of a female taken to the nth degree. But then I got to know him. And when you get to know somebody as a human with the history, everybody has a story. And he got to where he got for a reason, because he was rejected and he was he didn't trust, and he was insecure, and so I had much more feeling for him, and he opened my mind about this whole technology. It started with him, and then I went, I interviewed others. I went to the factory where they made those dolls. I interviewed the man who makes those dolls. I wanted to understand this new world of relationships. Now, the relationship with the doll is kind of maybe extreme, but I started seeing it in other ways, with the internet, with porn, with necrophilia, with other things. And I started seeing this larger picture. So he influenced me. One could say it was the beginning of this opening up of my interest.
Right.
And a lot of my interests come from working with clients.
When I read your paper, I thought to myself, wow, being a psychologist, since your craft is life itself, then it's an endless stream.
Endless.
And you can like, if you're a well-renowned psychiatrist like yourself who gets the most interesting patients in New York, you can write articles forever, right?
I can write articles forever. And also what I love about my profession is that my work is different every single day. I never know what to expect. Every single day. I'm not in the kind of work where every day I go, I do the same thing, or I know exactly. Every day, even patients I've been seeing for 20 years, they can come in, surprise me, talk about something I don't expect. And I love that. I love that. It keeps me interested. And it also, it's something, like you said, who affected me the most. I'm affected by my patients. You have to allow yourself to be affected. Now, sometimes that can be very draining in the kind of work that I do.
Aren't you afraid to fall in love with the patient, though?
I fall in love with patients. And I love my patients. Not all of them, but some of them are not that lovable. But if that's part of the problem. And then you see, with the work, when you start feeling that love feeling, it's like, they got better because now they've become more lovable. But am I afraid to fall? No, I keep boundaries. I let people affect me, but that's, being a psychoanalyst, you keep in check what you feel. You always have to check, like, what am I feeling? Is this coming from me? Is this coming from them? Or are they wanting me to feel this way? Or am I feeling something of theirs that they can't feel? Or is it something from my own background that resonates with what they're... So it's this constant work on oneself, not just with the patient.
Right.
This way. So it's a heavy duty work. It's not for the weak.
Thank you so much for coming. And I'm so happy we were able to enter Israel without the quarantines and all that. And I hope you're enjoying Tel Aviv.
I am. I love Tel Aviv. I love Tel Aviv.
You have a website, DanielelKnafo.com.
Mm-hmm.
You have books. We'll put links on Amazon. The recent paper, is it available?
The catfishing paper?
Yeah.
It just came out this week.
But is it free to read everywhere, or how does it work? Or
I don't know if it's free, but if somebody wants it, they can
reach
email
out to
me.
you. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're on social media at all?
I am. I'm not very active.
Okay.
I should be more, but I'm so busy that I don't have much time.
Right.
But I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
I just I don't check them very often.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you so much for coming. Before we go, we are sponsored by Arutz Sheva. Check them out, israelnationalnews.com. Great content in English about Israel. Also, the Australian Jewish News. Check them out at ajn.timesofisrael.com for the Australian angle of Jewish news. And guys, if you like what we do, you can support the podcast. We have those mugs, Danielle. One is BDS Tears mug and one is Nice Jewish Boy mug. So you can go to 2njb.com/merch and buy them. Also, you can support us. Go to 2njb.com/donate and every sum helps. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Fun.